Hello and welcome to my boss guide series for the Blackwing Descent, where I've compiled existing information combined with testing done on the beta to present these fights in a modern, up-to-date format. Before we get started, if you find this guide helpful, consider dropping a like, subscribing, and sharing this video with a friend. Otherwise, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoy. The Omnotron Defense System is one of two bosses that can be done at the beginning of Blackwing Descent. This fight is a multi-phase encounter, consisting of 4 unique elemental golems that take turns beating up your raid. They have a shared health pool, and apart from the start of the encounter, there will always be 2 golems active at a time. For this fight, you'll want 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and the rest DPS. The fight begins with your raid facing off against one of the 4 golems. In which order you'll face the Omnotron Defense System changes each week. Whichever golem you start with will have 100 energy that slowly depletes. Once it reaches 50 energy, a new golem with 100 energy will activate. When a new golem joins the fight, the old one will cast a shield on itself. These shields possess dangerous effects, so it's important DPS always swap to the newest target. Then, once a golem reaches 0 energy, it deactivates, becoming untargetable until the other remaining golems have been cycled through, at which point it rejoins the fight with 100 energy and the sequence repeats. With that out of the way, let's begin by breaking down each one of the golems in no particular order. Electron has access to the following abilities. Electric Discharge. Electron deals nature damage to up to 3 targets within 8 yards. The damage dealt increases with each jump. Lightning Conductor. Electron designates a player as a lightning conductor, causing them to inflict nature damage to players within 8 yards every 2 seconds. Unstable Shield. Shortly after reaching 50 energy, Electron uses Unstable Shield, making it so that damage dealt to Electron causes a static shock at the player's location, dealing massive damage to them and anyone within 6 yards. In summary, Electron is a spread out kind of guy. Try to maintain an 8-yard spread to reduce the raid's damage taken from both Electric Discharge and especially Lightning Conductor. The debuffed player must run out if not already spread. Magmatron has access to the following abilities. Incineration Security Measure. This deals raid-wide fire damage every second for 4 seconds. Acquiring Target. Magmatron fixates a random player, and after 4 seconds, begins channeling Flamethrower on his target, inflicting heavy fire damage in a frontal cone over 4 seconds. Barrier. Shortly after reaching 50 energy, Magmatron erects a damage absorb that, if broken, releases a Gale of Flame, inflicting lethal fire damage to all players in the room. To summarize, players should stand in a light spread near Magmatron so he can more easily dodge Flamethrower. And once Magmatron has acquired a target, the fixated player should try to point Magmatron away from the raid. Healers be ready with preventative healing, shielding, and externals for the targeted player. Note that if both Electron and Magmatron are active, the raid will take heavy damage. It's a great time to rotate through your raid and healing cooldowns during this phase. Toxictron has access to the following abilities. Chemical Bomb. Fires a chemical bomb at a random target, causing a chemical cloud at their location. The chemical cloud increases both the player's and boss's damage taken by 50%. Poison Protocol. Creates a poison bomb every 1.5 seconds that will explode after coming in contact with its target. This creates a poison puddle at its location, dealing nature damage to players within it. Poison Soaked Shell. Shortly after reaching 50 energy, Toxictron erects a shell that applies soaked in poison to attackers, dealing nature damage every 2 seconds. This effect stacks, but can be dispelled. In summary, drag Toxictron away from your raid, preferably to some designated position. Then, when Poison Protocol goes out, fixated players must kite the poison bombs while remaining DPS, preferably ranged, focus them down. Slows like a Hunter's Trap or a Frost Death Knight's Chillbanes are quite helpful here. Ranged DPS and healers should try to be max range from Toxictron to reduce the necessary movement should they be fixated. Finally, and if you can do so safely, have your tank drag the current kill target into Chemical Cloud, applying the 50% increased damage taken debuff to the boss. Arcanotron has access to the following abilities. Power Generator. Arcanotron summons a power generator under a random friendly target. This increases damage dealt by 50% of all friendly and enemy targets within 5 yards, and rapidly restores mana. Arcane Annihilator. This is an interruptible cast that deals heavy damage to a random player. Power Conversion. Shortly after reaching 50 energy, Arcanotron applies converted power to itself. This converts damage against it into stacks of power conversion, increasing magic damage and cast speed. This effect stacks. To summarize, while Arcanotron is active, your tank should try and kite the current DPS target just outside of the power generator so melee and ranged DPS can stand in and benefit from the 50% damage amp. Be sure to interrupt Arcane Annihilator, using ranged interrupts once its energy dips below 50 and it uses power conversion. Finally, if Arcanotron gets any stacks of converted power from this ability, they can and must be spell stolen or purged. There are many different ways to handle this fight depending on which golems are active together. I won't go over every combination of golem in detail, but here's a very brief summary of the different combinations. On heroic difficulty, Nefarian will intervene during the fight, adding an additional layer of complexity to the encounter. To start, Electron's lightning conductor may now be randomly flipped with Shadow Infusion, turning the player into a shadow conductor after 5 seconds. This ability causes damage to all nearby players, dealing increased damage the greater the distance from the shadow conductor. This means players affected by the lightning conductor debuff need to be mindful of whether or not they have Shadow Infusion. If they don't have it, they run out the same as before. However, if they do have it, they must stack with the rest of the raid. Moving on to Magmatron, their acquired target will now sometimes be rendered immobile with encasing shadows, meaning your raid will need to move away from the fixated player to avoid Flamethrower. It's worth noting a Mage's Blink or Warlock's Port still work here. Next, while Toxictron is active, Nefarian will use Grip of Death, pulling all nearby players to Nefarian's location. This usually occurs after a chemical bomb has been cast. Nefarian will teleport to the middle of the chemical cloud and pull raiders in. Simply run out when this happens. It's a good time to use Stampeding Roar and any other mobility cooldowns. Lastly, Arcanotron's power generator can now sometimes become overcharged, increasing the damage of players and NPCs within it by 100% and restoring even more mana. Except it now also grows in size until eventually exploding, dealing lethal damage to any players inside of it. Much like Grip of Death, just run out when this happens. The extra damage and mana regen are nice, but the explosion follows shortly afterwards, so players cannot linger for too long. Updating the table for Heroic, it now looks like this. Now, one quick note for tanks. Positioning this fight is all over the place. That said, one thing both tanks can do for every golem is once it reaches 50 energy and DPS swap to the new incoming golem, drag the old one away to avoid any additional splash or cleave damage. This way, we lessen the likelihood of the golems triggering their shield effects, which are quite nasty. Once all DPS have swapped off the old one, you can then move it around to better suit the combination of golems you're currently facing. Additionally, just before the golem you're tanking reaches 0 energy, there will be this brief period where a new golem has spawned that you as a tank will need to pick up, while the old one is still hitting you. So there can be this very short overlap where you're tanking 2 golems at once until the old one deactivates. Be sure to have defensives lined up for when this occurs. Get in the groove of rotating through the 4 golems, and eventually this boss will go down. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.